Dream sets. We all have them. Our ideal, perfect series of figures from our favorite eras of wrestling. Logistically and in terms of marketability, sometimes our most desirable figures simply cannot be produced in large quantities. This leaves some names stranded in time to the era their original figures came out in, and for some, it means they may never be bestowed with their very own wrestling figure at all. But what if we could just pretend for a minute that the higher-ups at Mattel greenlit a series of figures tailored to a specific era in wrestling history? What if you could walk into a Target or a Toys R Us and stumble upon an entire series based off an era of wrestling you adored? In this new series dubbed Wrestling Figure Fantasy, I'm going to create an entire set of figures based on an era of time. The packaging, the names, the design motif, all of it will be concentrated on a respective era. I want to blend fantasy with realism, so unfortunately that means no Owen Hart, Benoit, or anyone else that may have complicated issues that will likely never be resolved. It also means that sets will have to have some level of restraint in respect to balance, creating a blend of desirable figures for collectors and marketable names for casual fans. In other words, I want to make this feel both real and possible, and embellish a little bit for the fun of it. Without further ado, let's jump into the inaugural edition of Figure Fantasy with the Golden Age of Wrestling. The Golden Age was an era popularized by the hysteria of Hulk Hogan and the wrestling boom of the mid to late 80s through the early 90s. With a vibrant cast of characters, WWF presented its superstars largely as colorful cartoon characters brought to life. The wrestling figures at the time were the LJN Wrestling Superstars and the Hasbro line, the latter which blended into the early stages of the New Generation era. If technology in the 80s and early 90s was as advanced as it is now with Mattel, what could have these figures possibly looked like? Let's find out. Here is one of the most exuberant wrestling managers of all time, Jimmy Hart. I gave Jimmy a fuchsia colored suit with a piano key tie and matching shoe trim. Mattel previously released Jimmy in Hall of Fame Series 3, where he was sporting a more muted attire he often wears for current appearances. I figured that one of his bright attires would pop right off the shelf, while still being ambiguous enough to be not character specific like some of his suits often were. That way you can display him with anyone. I also gave him a new head mold with a smile instead of a loudmouth yelling mold that Mattel used for Hall of Fame Series 3. Here is what he looks like in the packaging. Jimmy comes with a megaphone accessory and sunglasses. I designed this packaging in mind with the 80s and early 90s aesthetic. It is based on the early 90s neon entranceway, but the neon colors, space backdrop, yellow title card, and plain bright blue also signify the 80s motif as well. Next up is one of the biggest heels of the 1980s, the Iron Sheik. I chose the red and green attire for him because of the historical significance of it being what he wore when Hogan beat him for his very first world title in WWF. Also, Mattel already covered his detailed pants, the orange tights attire, and his blue attire in the Legends 2-pack line. Remember that one? Here is the Iron Sheik on card. A 1980s set has to have an evil foreign villain trope, and Iron Sheik is one of the most memorable of them all. It also includes an Iranian flag along with a checkered turban. I also corrected the Mattel figure's short shorts they gave him in the 2-packs line for some reason. He has the same unique torso mold and unique curly boots. Here is a first time in the line figure, Greg the Hammer Valentine. Greg is one of those guys that might be difficult to market these days, but with a luxurious robe and the Golden Age marketing approach, perhaps the Mattel rookie figure of Valentine could do well. I gave Valentine a modified version of his Jakks Classic Superstars robe. The Jakks robe was very impressive, but his real robe had piped designs and not just columned hearts. I tried to do a general recreation of this. I also figured since most 80s wrestlers wore colorful attire, it'd be nice to have a primarily black attired figure in this set. This next figure is one that is just barely on the edge of being a part of the Golden Age. It's the neon cowboy style Randy Savage. This particular pink attire is from his match against the Ultimate Warrior at SummerSlam 1992. Mattel already made Warrior in his literal muscle tank top look, so this figure would be an excellent shelf piece alongside him. Carded, it pops right off with the blue backing of the card. His hot pink and yellow colors with the floral designs really make for a unique figure. I also gave him the Elite 23 head mold, which I feel is criminally underutilized by Mattel. He has a new cowboy hat and sunglasses too. This figure would definitely be pushing the budget, but with Jimmy Hart and Iron Sheik having fairly simple attires and accessories, hopefully a decked out Savage in the aforementioned Valentine and robe could be possible. So in figure fantasy, I follow the Hall of Fame formula of 4 single wrestlers per set. However, I also wanted to include a supplementary 2-pack line as well. I tried to keep accessories down to create a realistic possibility for a discounted price compared to 2 single elites by themselves. The first 2-pack is one of the most essential tag teams of the Golden Age, the British Bulldogs. While Davey Boy has had several figures from Mattel, we have yet to see Dynamite Kid in any capacity since the classic Superstars days. He is a first time in the line for this series. I chose this attire for the Bulldogs because I felt it helps their boots and socks stand out against the dark red. In lieu of the tag belts, this set would include their dog Matilda, along with a leash. Jakks actually produced a Matilda in the classic Superstars line, and I feel something that quirky and unique for wrestling figures would be a decent draw at retail. The other 2-pack in this set would be based on the classic SummerSlam '89 battle between Rick Rude and the Ultimate Warrior. Rude wore one of his coolest unsung attires at this event, which depicted the Ultimate Warrior's face melting with sweat and or tears dripping down. I give Rude his poofy hair look, which hasn't quite been done yet as of this video's release. Warrior, on the other hand, has a bright neon green attire with pink Warrior logos on the pads. The set also comes with the classic Intercontinental title. I mainly decided to do these 2 in the 2-packs due to marketability. Warrior figures usually sell, and Rude has had so many crazy, vibrant attires that it only makes sense to include him in an 80s themed series. There's one more special one-off item I wanted to include to celebrate 1980s WWF, and it was one of the most infamous moments in wrestling history. Piper's Pit, the Coconut Incident. The set includes Roddy Piper and Jimmy Snuka. Piper wore an all-red getup that he wore frequently in 1984. I couldn't find the exact shirt logo, as Piper seems to have made the shirt himself, so I recreated it myself to be a general concept of what it would look like. Jimmy Snuka is a bit of a controversial inclusion in this day and age, but considering the man passed away and WWE doesn't seem too shy to honor him, I figured it's still a possibility. This Snuka would capture his barefoot tiger print tights look. I also gave him a wider torso than the Legends figure, along with a headband. The actual set on card looks as follows. It includes Piper with removable entrance gear, Snuka with a removable headband, 2 breakable coconuts, Snuka's traditional blue entrance gear, and the main draw of the set, a Piper's Pit backdrop. I recreated this to look very close to the one Jimmy Snuka was thrown into in this unforgettable moment in wrestling history. It'd be presented as a box set, likely as a store exclusive somewhere in this fantasy WWE era's line. With the unique Piper look and the highly desirable classic Snuka look, hopefully this would be a set that could be realistically created. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the entire Golden Age series. We have 4 singles with Jimmy Hart, Randy Savage, Greg Valentine, and Iron Sheik, the 2-packs, which include the British Bulldogs and the Ultimate Warrior and Ravishing Rick Rude, and the special box set for Piper's Pit with Rowdy Roddy Piper and Superfly Jimmy Snuka. I know there are plenty of names not included in this set that people may have wanted to see, but I went with what I felt would make sense for retail with respect to what Mattel has already done and what could possibly be done budget-wise. I hope you enjoyed this first edition of Wrestling Figure Legacy Figure Fantasy. Your support helps ensure that this won't be the last.